Odinn had come to Midgard, not as a wanderer, as was his wont to do, but as the All-Father in all his splendid glory. Riding Sleipnir his 8-legged horse, whose hooves echoed upon the ground, so that those humans that heard it may have thought that Thor was beating his hammer. But there were no dark clouds in the sky, no rain falling, and no lightning to strike where it would. Drawn now to the rider, humanity saw that he carried his spear, and over his shoulder he carried a sack. And those who saw him wondered why the king of the Aesir had come, and where he was going to, accompanied by his 2 wolves, whilst overhead 2 ravens flew in wide circles, calling out, it seemed. Not all of the humans could travel to the All-Father, or let their curiosity draw them into discovering the source of the great noise. Unbidden now, the wolves and the ravens took leave of Odinn and sought out humanity to herd them together, to let them know that Odinn was amongst them, that they should pay attention. After a time, the procession that followed was forced to halt as Odinn had now stopped, and then he dismounted the great horse, looked about him, and then proceeded to descend into a small dell. Those that dared to follow stood in awe, in fear and wonder as they watched the All-Father, surrounding him on the slopes, waiting. Fear became tangible when Odinn stuck his great spear into the ground. He remained silent for the moment, ignoring the humans who had gathered, knowing they watched him, captivated. And the fear was strengthened when he tipped out the contents of the sack he had carried, and the bones of what had once been a person fell unceremoniously to the ground. Many recoiled in horror, uncertain if the remains were human or if they belonged to something else. Rooted in their fear, they watched Odinn continue. Now the All-Father crouched down and started to arrange the bones, sorting them into a human-like shape. Perhaps grimly some noticed that the All-Father knew where each bone needed to go as he pieced together the puzzle, until finally he took the skull, stared at it for a few moments, and the remains were whole, so that it gave an indication of the life it had once supported. Next, Odinn took out some jewellery and adorned the skeleton with a necklace, some rings, a few gold coins, and finally he placed some black feathers on the skull's peak, adorning it with a headdress, before he stood up and looked down upon the remains. None who watched could hear what the All-Father said next, though he appeared to be speaking to the skeleton, and his hands moved about, making gestures. The gathered people felt the air grow heavy with power. The light dimmed while a glow emanated around the remains that Odinn had arranged. Finally, raising a fist to the sky, Odinn spoke. "Heed my words, people of Midgard, sons and daughters of Heimdallr." Odinn brought his fist down and thrust the power he had summoned into the skeleton, and with a sickening lurch and a piercing, unearthly scream, the skeleton gained a putrescent skin and hair, and a female form rose up and replied to her summoner. "Father of the slain, you have summoned me here to tell of ancient times and deeds, to test me." The seer stared with false eyes at Odinn, who now watched her as did the gathered crowd, While the humans were struck by their fear, Odinn waited as his ritual took root, and the seer engaged with him. Thus Odinn spoke. I recall the Jotnar, seer, born in ages past, in the first days when they raised me. I remember the 9 worlds, 9 Jotnar women, and the great tree Yggdrasil that binds all together. Compelled by the magic, the seer now spoke as Odinn spoke, their 2 voices speaking as one. I see the beginning, the time of Ymir the Jotun, before sand, before sea or waves. Nowhere was there earth, neither was there sky above. And now the seer continued as Odinn listened. The voice of the seer seemed distant, elsewhere, detached from any personality, projecting into the past. 3 sons of Bor created Jord, and it was those 3 sons that crafted Midgard. Light shone from the south upon their hall, and about that place the first plants grew. Wandering, the sun was revealed as the light. Stars did not know their purpose. The moon was yet to discover the power he possessed. The powers then assumed their thrones and made decisions, naming night, morning, and midday, afternoon and evening too, and so the powers might reckon upon the aging of the worlds. Now the seer faltered, and seemed to diminish slightly, hunching over, perhaps believing her task done. Yet Odinn was not done with the seer. He nodded his head and spoke now to pull her back to her task. The Aesir met at the plain of Idavol, where temples and shrines were built. Forges were made, precious things being forged, as well as tongs and other tools. They played games, the seer spoke, and knew happiness. There was no lack of gold. And then came 3 women, Jotnar, come from Jotunheim. The powers then assumed their thrones and made decisions. Dwarves were to be created, a lord of dwarves from the blood of Ymir. Name them, said Odinn. Mutzaltgirnir was lord, and next there came Durin. Then they made many dwarves, and it was Durin that gave them their names. Nai, Nidi, Nordri, Sudri, Ostri, Vestri, Aldiofa, Valin, Nar and Nain, Nipingra, Dane, Biffa, Baffa, Bomba, Nori, An and Anna, Oin, Mjotvitnir, Vigir and Gandalfa, Vindalfla, Thorin, Thra and Thrain, Theka, Lita and Vita, Nia and Niarada. Now the dwarves, Regin and Radsvidir, rightly counted. Fili, Kili, Fundin, Nali, Hepti, Vili, Hanar, Svea, Billinga, Bruni, Bilda, and Buri, Fra, Hornbori, Frega, and Loni, Orvanga, Yari, Eikinsjaldi. The dwarves, Valin's kin and kingdom, descended from Lothar, sought out from rocky halls, crossed gravelled fields, found Yoravala. There were Draupnir and Dogsfrasir, Ha, Hawkspori, Levanga, Gloin, Dori, Ori, Dufla, Andvari, Skirfir, Verfir, Skvarfida, Alf and Ingvi, Eikingsjaldi, Fiala and Frosty, Finna and Ginnar. As long as humans remain, these lists remain. All shall be remembered. The seer now stopped. Once more, perhaps, She thought her task complete, like the list of dwarves recounted was complete. Blank eyes looked around, waiting for release. However, Odinn was not done with her, and now he spoke once more. Unto 3 gods of shared kin, powerful and loving Aesir away from home, found on land of little meaning, ask an Amblu, fateless. The seer reconnected to the words spoken by Odinn, and he allowed her to continue. They had no breath or spirit. Mindless, they lacked vitality, lacked in colour. They were gifted by Odinn, they were gifted by Honir, they were gifted by Lodir, and given form. And then, as if suddenly drawn elsewhere, the seer now looked beyond her recounting. In a split second her sight was elsewhere now. Ash I know stands, called Yggdrasil, a tall tree pouring bright power. Dew falls from it upon the valleys, and it stands forever green above Erda Bruni. From there come women with great knowledge from beneath that tall tree. Erd named one, another Verdandi, carving into the wood. The third is named Skald. They lay down laws, shape lives. For the children of all ages they cast and determine fate. Once more the seer felt the surge of vision through her, twisting again, unfocused, and then refocusing. Another vision came on strong within her sight, and she spoke without taking a breath, but became distant. She remembers the first war of the folk. Golvigr pierced with spears, and in the High One's hall Golvigr was burned. 3 times they burned her. 3 times she returned reborn, yet she still lives. Bright One she was called, when to home she came. A seer that foresaw much, she knew cedar. Cedar she did where it was needed, with playful purpose, and was always loved by wicked women. All the gods then went to their thrones of fate to discuss this matter. What of the Aesir should yield or suffer? What of the Aesir should settle in debt or pay otherwise? Odinn hurled his spear, and into the folk it flew. There was war, the first in the world. Broken were the borders and halls of the Aesir, while the Vanir brought their magic victoriously to all. All the gods then went to the thrones of fate to discuss this matter. Who was to blame for this treachery? Or who had pledged the poet's maiden to the Jotnar? Thor was in the mood to fight. He will seldom sit still when he hears of such things. Oaths broken, words and pledges, all the powerful words that had been spoken between them. Once more the seer felt the siege of another vision, and twisted again, seeing into the past, yet now something changed within her. Something of her own power connected to her. The hidden truth within her mind brought a new, unexpected clarity as she continued speaking. She knows Heimdallr hid his hearing beneath the sacred tree. She sees flowing down a waterfall to the eye of the All-Father. Do you wish to know more, and what? It seemed in that moment a challenge to Odinn, and for the All-Father he could see that the seer had reclaimed something akin to her living power. The journey through the visions, the prophecy had gifted to her something of herself. Progress now would be met with resistance somewhere. The true challenge started now. The seer spoke, awakening. I sat alone until the Ancient One came. the old one of the Aesir, and our vision met. Why do you ask me? Why do you test me? I know all, Odinn. I know where you hid your eye in Mimir's well. Mimir drinks mead each morning of the Allfather. Do you wish to know more, and what? Now the seer saw the moments before she was risen by Odinn's power. For her, Odinn chose rings and jewelled necklaces, for her wisdom and visions, seeing widely, so widely into all worlds. Now she seemed calm, looking with eyes that saw many things at once. I see Valkyria coming from far and wide, ready to ride to the god's realm. Skuld held a shield, and Skogul another, Gunnar, Hildra, Gondel, and Geirskogul. Now the count is done, the women of the One, ready to ride to the earth, Valkyr. I saw for Balder, the bloody god, Odinn's child, his fate hidden, stood on high, slender and very fair, the mistletoe. From that which appeared so harmless came the arrow. Hodder made his shot. Balder's brother was born quickly. Thus Odinn's son began fighting at 1 night old. He did nothing for himself until he brought Balder's killer to the pyre. Inflict sorrow at Fensalem for Valhalla. Do you wish to know more, and what? Odinn remained silent, regarding the seer who looked at him, thinking perhaps once again that her task was done. His eye stared at her, his face without emotion, his hand still, the audience captivated as equally as she was in that moment. No, she realized she was not done. There was more to be asked, more to be given. She sees a prisoner laying beneath a grove of cauldrons, looking like Loka apparently. There sits Sigyn, very unhappy with her husband. Do you wish to know more, and what? Once more the challenge to Odinn. Once more he refused to give away anything to the seer. He was still searching for answers, answers that she was obliged to give in her thrall to the moment. A falling river flows from the east through poisoned valleys full of knives and swords. Slidder it is called. Stood far north of dark plains a hall of gold of Sindri's kin. In another stood at a colney, Beerhull of Jotun's, one called Brimir. She sees a hall standing far from the sun on a beach of corpses. North faces the doors there. Poison drips from the roofing. That hall is made of serpent spines. She saw there wading in heavy streams, oath breakers, murderers, and those who seduce others' lovers. There Nidhogger feasts on the corpses of the fallen. Wolves tear at them. Do you wish to know more, and what? In grim light the seer shone in power, reaching into visions, bringing answers to questions unspoken by Odinn. A rush of power surged through her. It gave her confidence as she continued. East sat an aging woman in a forest of iron and feeds all kin of Fenris. From among these one will come, Moon's abductor, in spells high form, filling deeply from life of man, rid rulers through bloodshed, black becomes the sun, is summer that follows, the weather cruel. Do you wish to know more, and what? A shudder racked through the seer, forcing a shift in focus, a drift of power and slackening control. A few moments pass, heartbeats in chests of men, the eyes of the seer pulse. Odinn remains silent. His command still stands. His power remains resolute as the seer drifts into another vision. Sat there on a mound and playing harp the herdsman glad Egdir. Near to him in the gallows wood crowed a bright red rooster called Fiala. Crowing near the Aesir Gullinkambi that wakens the warriors of the Father of Hosts. And another crows beneath the earth, a soot-red rooster in the halls of Heljar. Garm barks loudly before the cave. Fetters break and tear and runs free. She knows many things I see further still ahead, all the way to Ragnarok and doom for the gods. Emboldened, the seer now looked around to the gathered crowd, not just addressing Odinn, but those of humanity gathered in fear of the prophecy, and she continued to speak. Brothers will fight brothers and kill one another. Children, sisters, betraying all relations. Hard is the world, whoredom unbound, an axe age, sword age, shields are cleft asunder, wind age, a wolf age. Before the world plunges, no man will spare another. Like Mimir said, the sleeping well kindled at the blast of Giala Horni. Hard blows Heimdalla, horn held high while Odinn speaks with Mimir's head. Ancient Yggdrasil stands, echoes the sound as Jotun break loose. All walk the road to Helvegum as Surtur devours all who surrender. And now the seer turns to Odinn. What of the Aesir? What of the elves? Gone all of Jotunheimer, the Aesir converse. Stalwart dwarves are standing firm while wise ones watch. Do you wish to know more or what? Now the seer stood tall, finding surging power in the speaking of the future. Sensing a loosened hold on this power by Odinn, she would have no other moment than this once she realized. Such was fate. Hrim advances east, a shield before him. Great Jormungandr is in a devouring frenzy. The serpent churns the waves. The eagle shrieks, tearing into corpses, and Naglfar is loose. Sailing from the east, coming to war are Muspels, across the sea, and Loki steers. For they are the monstrous allies, within brother Byalists also. Surtur wars from the south with scorching fires. The sun shines brightly upon his sword. Rocky cliffs break and spells fall. Many walk the road to Helveg. The sky is torn apart. Now comes the second sorrow forth, when Odinn goes to battle with the wolf. Beljar fights against Surtur. Then must Frigg's husband fall. Now it was voiced, the prophecy of his own doom. And Odinn knew all must hear to the end, that the seer must complete her part, knowing she would be defiant. He raised his right hand in a fist and enforced his will upon the seer. Her light that had been shining dimmed a little as a knife slipping into her soul. The message was to continue. Now comes the mighty son of the Allfather, Vidar, to battle the great beast. Leading his hand, he stabs the sword deep into the beast's heart. thus revenge for the Allfather. Odinn's great son Thor comes to fight the Midgard serpent Jormungandr and kills the great beast. All humans must abandon their homes as Thor falls after 9 steps deathward, yet no scorn may be uttered. The sun turns black, the land sinks into the seas, bright stars diminish, steams rise up in the great fires and burn even the clouds in the sky. Garm barks loudly before the cave, fetters break and tear and runs free. The seer seemed to be decaying now, exhausted. The light began to fade in her eyes, her back hunched over. In surrender she looked once more to Odinn, yet there was no mercy to be found in his stare, and so she continued. She sees upcoming a second time, Jord with Aegir enduring, waterfalls flow, an eagle soars above, hunting fish. Finding a seer on Idda Valley, and they converse within the bones of the earth girdler, and they remember the great events and Vimbalti's ancient runes. They also find the golden gaming pieces in the grass, those with which they had played in time of old. Unsown fields will grow fertile, all sicknesses healed, Balder will come. Hoder and Balder will settle in Sigtoptir, the great gods of choice. Do you wish to know more, or what? Desperation now seeped into the voice of the seer, disconnecting from the world. Her time caught within the magic was coming to an end. Surely Odinn would release her now. He did not. He gestured her to continue. Her task was not yet complete. Then Honor will divine, and the sons of brothers will inhabit the wide-wind world. Do you wish to know more, or what? She spat the words now in weary venom. Her bones creaked and cracked. The putrescence was nearing its end. And now Odinn eased his will as he watched her end in time, and what would be her final words. She sees a hall standing, fair as the sun, golden roofed aglow. There the brave shall dwell and enjoy the days in happiness, until comes a dark dragon flying, this glimmering serpent from darkness. In his wings Nidhogger brings corpses as he flies. Now she will sink down. The last of the light in the seer's eyes faded as the spell came to an end. Her bones fell to the floor, the rags and ornaments decayed into dust, and an eerie silence followed as smoke drifted from the corpse. Slowly the humans were torn from their bewitchment to wait upon the words of Odinn standing before them, for he had words to speak.